The best way to learn a language? Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. For instance, I've been using Babbel's convenient courses to help me learn basic conversational skills in German while I'm getting ready for a little trip I'm planning. It's not a language I'd ever studied before, but I find the lessons really easy and kind of like hand-holding me through learning a completely new language to me. And it's reassuring to know that with the help of Babbel, I'll be able to greet people, order food, and ask for directions without having to consult language apps while I'm in Deutschland. I'm still learning. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This is what you do when you've just found that statement handbag on eBay and you want to build an entire wardrobe around it. You start selling to keep buying. Yep, on eBay. Over that all-black everything phase? List it and buy all the color. Feeling more vintage than ever? It's out with the new and in with the pre-loved. Next thing you know, you've refreshed your wardrobe basically without spending a dime. Yeah, eBay, the place to buy and sell new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion.
Hello and welcome to Vulgar History, the feminist women's history comedy podcast, and this is a bonus episode. So we're about to start season 7, part 2. This whole series is about Marie Antoinette. It's called How Do You Solve a Problem Like Marie Antoinette? Season 7, part 1, we were kind of looking at what was happening in other places during Marie Antoinette's life, like specifically a lot of what was going on in the United States. Season 7, part 2, we're going to be looking at, meanwhile, back in France, what was happening in France. We're kind of setting the stage for what Marie Antoinette was up to. And a lot of that involves Versailles. And Versailles was, as we know it, was very much invented by Louis XIV. And I had done this episode about Louis XIV on my Patreon. So I have a series on Patreon where when there's a man who I encounter in a story who's terrible, or honestly a woman who's terrible, just a person who I don't want to celebrate, a person who maybe I want to learn a bit more about, but who is not really a regular vulgar history type person, I do those on the Patreon in a series that's called On Patreon. So this asshole. But, you know, just because of the way that some podcast apps don't like swear words, we're calling it. So this goofball. And so this is an episode from Patreon, and this is so for people who join the Patreon at the $5 per month or more level, they get access to all these bonus episodes. And this one I'm just making available to everybody because it really sets the scene for what we're going to be talking about starting on Wednesday with the upcoming next episode of Vulgar History. So this is me from a bit ago. I learned about Louis XIV and I shared what I learned. And the thing about these episodes, so this asshole / so this goofball episodes, they're more casual than a vulgar history episode, which you might be like, vulgar history is already pretty casual. But I'll say, because it's for Patreon, and it's a bonus thing, you know, I learn some things and then I share it, and I don't use as many sources as I do for a regular vulgar history episode. But part of that is because when you're researching these very famous men from history, there's always a book, or even just like the Wikipedia entry has got kind of everything you need to know. You don't have to dig around as much. Anyway, this is a special bonus, so enjoy this discussion of Louis XIV. Hello and welcome to So This Asshole of Vulgar History, spin-off podcast just for you, the Patreons. I'm happy to be sharing this story with you. I got a bit off of the regular monthly schedule for recording these because, life and also what is time. But here we are talking about Louis XIV, aka Louis XIV, aka Marie Mancini's ex, the one that got away. So he is an extraordinarily well-known person. I just didn't know about him myself until recently-ish because I have never really studied this part of French history. There's a TV show called Versailles several years ago, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it looked really beautiful. And it has taken me a while to realize that I just don't watch costume dramas that much. And I was like, oh, this is a show I'll like. But it's a costume drama. And it's also mostly about men characters, which is two strikes against it for me. Again, all the respect for costume dramas. Reign, my favorite show of all time. Since I've been doing this podcast and doing history work, costume dramas are not a restful thing for me to watch because it feels like work a little bit. So when I'm watching TV, I like to watch, lately, old seasons of Survivor or Murder, She Wrote. Anyway, so I was like, okay, Versailles. The men have the most beautiful wigs. I think the show is well known for having beautiful men, long hair, wigs, but also, so it's a historical drama, mostly about men, and also about a history, a time period I do not personally know a lot about, which is the same similar issues as when I first tried watching The White Queen, the Elizabeth Woodville show on Starz, because before I knew about the War of the Roses, I was just I don't know what this story is. Anyway. So I've avoided thus far in my life learning about Louis XIV until now, and I'm going to share with you what I learned by reading the Wikipedia article. I know there are several new members of the Patreon since the last time I posted a So This Asshole episode, so just as a reminder to everybody, because the men we talk about on this show are really well known, I don't need to do very much digging around to find information about them, and also this is a fun time to just chat. Me and you, I do less research for this show because I don't need to do as much research because the facts are just there in the world. So my source for this is literally just the Wikipedia page, but I edited out all of the boring military bits because that's not what I'm here for. That's not what you come to me for. That's not what I'm about. So Louis XIV, who is, oh wait, let me just check because I think Google remembers me looking at this before. So the list of the longest reigning monarchs, I think Queen Elizabeth II is inching her way up towards Louis XIV. So Louis XIV was king for 72 years, 110 days. Elizabeth II, as of the day I'm recording this, which is September 3rd, has been queen for 70 years, 209 days. Is she going to hold on for basically 2 more years just to get ahead? I don't know, maybe. But he reigned for so long because he started off as king when he was very young and he stayed king until he's very old. So he was born September 5th. Oh, it's just almost his birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday episode of So This Asshole. So he was born on September 5th, 1638. His parents were Louis XIII and his wife Anne of Austria, who, again, I'm just going to double check, but I think was a Habsburg. Anne of Austria was, oh, for sure, yeah, she's a Habsburg. She's from Spain. She became Queen of France. Anyway, she's a pretty formidable person, as we will see. So he was named Louis Dieudonné, which means Louis the God-given, and he bore the traditional title of French heir apparent, Dauphin. So at the time of his birth, his parents had been married for 23 years. His mother had experienced 4 stillbirths before this, and so this was very much it was their rainbow baby moment. So he was sort of a divine gift. His birth was a miracle of God, and his relationship with his mother was, what it says here, uncommonly affectionate for the time. We've talked about this. This is the era of Hortense Mancini. Parents and kids do not spend time together. This is circa within the era of Anne of Denmark, James I's wife, who everyone was so freaked out that she wanted to spend time with her children. Everyone's like, what are you doing? So he spent time with his mom, unusual. The two of them, they were great pals. They were both greatly interested in food and theater. She was interested in that, and then he became interested in that because they hung out so much and they had a close relationship. So importantly, it was his mother who gave Louis his belief in the absolute and divine power of his monarchical rule. So the whole thing about absolute power corrupts absolutely may or may not have been written about him, but that's certainly what his deal became. So his father sensed his own death coming. I guess he was sick or something. So when Louis was 4 years old, this was happening. The custom of the time would have made Queen Anne the sole regent of France, like the regent while Louis was a little boy. But Louis XIII decreed that a regency council would rule on his son's behalf because he didn't have faith in his wife's political abilities, which is like mistake number one. But he did make her the head of the council. So then he died. And 4 days after he died, Queen Anne had the will annulled by the Parliament of Paris, which abolished the Regency Council. So he didn't have faith in her political abilities. 4 days after he died, she was like, fuck you. So this made Anne the sole regent of France. And yeah, so she kind of was in charge. One of her most important political decisions, maybe the most important, was to nominate our old friend Cardinal Mazarin, the uncle of the Mazarinets, as her chief minister. Yeah, so she wanted to give her son, I'm talking about her because this really sets the scene for Louis a little boy for a lot of the story. She wanted to give him absolute authority and a victorious kingdom. And so she chose Mazarin as her right-hand man because of his ability to be schemy and his total dependence on her. Let's see, so she protected him by arresting and exiling her followers who conspired against him. She left the direction of daily administration of policy to Cardinal Mazarin, who I have to just tell you, I'm being very good on this podcast and the main podcast to always call him Cardinal Mazarin, but I started thinking of him as Cardi Maz, and I have to translate to myself Cardinal Mazarin, not Cardi Maz. There's a lot of place setting, but it's important. So a civil war known as the Fronde, which is the French word for the slings used to smash windows. So slingshots. So a civil war known as the slingshot erupted in France. So Anne and Cardi Maz basically people were mad at them. She believed in the divine right of kings of France. The people who were their enemies did not like them and maybe did not believe in that also. So she advocated a policy in all matters relating to the king's authority, a very radical one. She imprisoned any aristocrat or member of parliament who challenged her will because she wanted to transfer to her son an absolute authority in the matters of finance and justice. So the Frondeurs were not, I don't know, it just seems again, I don't know a lot about the history of France, but it seems it's just perpetual revolutions happening, people not being fans of the government, which I guess is why she wanted to give her son absolute power, etc. Paris erupted in rioting. Louis was 12 at this point. A mob of angry Parisians broke into the royal palace and demanded to see him. And they were, in fact, I guess, armed or whatever. They were led into the royal bedchamber. They looked at him. He pretended to be asleep, and then they left. This threat to the royal family made Anne decide to flee Paris with the king and the courtiers. Eventually, a political compromise was reached. The court returned to Paris. And this would have been long-term traumatizing for Louis, obviously, and explained his later distrust of A, Paris, and B, the aristocracy. So I don't know, so the Fronde ended, then there was a second Fronde, started another slingshot-based war, named war, I guess they weren't just warring with slingshots. So this was another upper-class insurrection. Again, Queen Anne was pretty crucial in defeating the Fronde. Mazarin ended up going into exile for a number of years. The Frondeurs this time claimed to be acting on Louis's behalf and in his interest against his mother and Cardi Maz, who they did not like. Anyway, so he eventually came of age, became the king, and then the Frondeurs kind of lost steam and just petered out. They kind of ended. Cardi Maz returned from exile, and Anne was no longer the regent during this period. Louis, as a hot young teen, we know what happened. He fell in love with Cardi Maz's niece, Marie Mancini. But his mother and Cardi Maz ended this by sending Marie away from court to be married in Italy to that guy who was terrible and who she later escaped because he tried to poison her, etc. So I'm just skimming past because this is talking things we know about Marie Mancini. Yeah, so she wanted to marry Louis to the daughter of Philip IV of Spain, so a Spanish wife. So Louis was declared to have reached the age of majority 1651. Cardinals died 10 years later, at which point Louis assumed personal control of the reins of government and astonished his court by declaring he would rule without a chief minister. So the treasury version bankruptcy, he's not doing great. I think it's around this time, I'm sure I'm going to get to it later in these notes, where he just kind of like forcibly moved the whole court to Versailles so that they could be there trapped with him. Lana Wood Johnson has talked about this, I think, in some of the Vulgar Peace Theater episodes, maybe the main episodes too. But or maybe just in like DMs with me where I was like, what's this deal? But to stop them from being able to complain about him, he just kept them in thrall to him all the time, trapped everybody at Versailles. I guess that's what the TV show Versailles is about. Again, haven't watched it. So yeah, there's issues with money and things. This is part of why, presumably, he was borrowing money from Hortense Mancini's horrible husband. And that was the whole reason why he wouldn't annul their marriage, because he needed the money from him as a money lender. So one of his more infamous, this is a section called Relations with the Major Colonies, because this is the big colonize-a-palooza for Western European nations. So there was the Black Code, or the Code Noir, which was a decree that sanctioned slavery, but attempted to humanize the practice by prohibiting the separation of families. In French colonies, only Roman Catholics could own slaves, and the enslaved people had to be baptized. So I don't know. This is apparently one of his more infamous decrees. French colonies multiplied in Africa, the Americas, and Asia during his reign. French explorers made discoveries, quote unquote, in North America. France also attempted to participate actively in Jesuit missions to China. So he's just like going all over the place. He's like the French, this is like, I'm going to guess, this is like the peak of French influence internationally. His librarian and translator, Arcadio Huang, was Chinese. So he's got some international influences there as well. So domestically, the success of all this colonization work increased the influence of the crown and its authority over the church and aristocracy, thus consolidating absolute monarchy in France. Here we go. So by forcing his nobles to stay at Versailles, he achieved increased control over the French aristocracy. He turned the palace into an irresistible combination of marriage market, employment agency, and entertainment capital of aristocratic Europe, boasting the best theater, opera, music, gambling, sex, and most important to him, I guess, hunting. And also because he just hated Paris. So apartments were built to house those who wanted to stay there, but the pensions and privileges necessary to live in a style appropriate to the rank were only possible by waiting constantly on Louis. So an elaborate court ritual was created where the king became the center of attention and was observed throughout the day by the public. With his excellent memory, this sounds almost like a photographic memory level, like a Mary Lou Henner situation. Lou could see who attended him at court and who was absent, facilitating the subsequent distribution of favors and positions. So only the people he saw would get money, which encouraged people to just be gazing at him all the time. He also controlled the nobility through censorship, which involved opening letters to discern their author's opinion of the government and king. It says, moreover, by entertaining, impressing, and domesticating the aristocrats with extravagant luxury and other distractions, Louis not only cultivated public opinion of him, but he also ensured the aristocracy remained under his scrutiny. So they're too busy trying to impress him to do another Fronde situation. I like the details in this next paragraph. So his extravagance at Versailles extended far beyond the scope of elaborate court rituals. He took delivery of an African elephant as a gift from the King of Portugal. He encouraged leading nobles to live at Versailles. This, along with a prohibition of private armies, prevented them from passing time on their own estates and in their regional power bases, from which they historically waged local wars and plotted resistance to royal authority. So he basically turned the old military aristocracy into becoming ceremonial courtiers, which weakened their power. In their place, he raised commoners, or the more recently ennobled bureaucratic aristocrats. So it is believed, very vague descriptor, but this tracks with what I'm figuring out. Louis' policies were rooted in his experiences during the Fronde, when men of high birth readily took up the rebel cause against him. So this victory over the nobility it ensured the end of major civil wars within France until the French Revolution about 100 years later. And that was, lots of things are going on. But the thing is, Louis was good at being king in the context of what that looks like and means, in a way that his grandson was not. if the Louis during the French Revolution is his grandson. The one played by Jason Schwartzman in the movie. So yeah, under Louis, France was the leading European power. Most wars pivoted around its aggressiveness. No European state exceeded it in population, and no one could match its well-central location and very strong professional army. But here's the juicy / more interesting part. That was just kind of place setting. So personal life, marriages, and children. So his wife was Maria Theresa of Spain. They had 6 children, but however, only one child, the eldest, survived to adulthood, which is Louis, le Grand Dauphin, also known as Monseigneur. There's another person who I'm not talking about here, but around the same era, who's called La Grande Mademoiselle. French people have great nicknames. So Maria Theresa died in 1683, and despite evidence of affection early on in their marriage, Louis was never faithful to Maria Theresa, but nor was he expected to be. This was the whole thing about the maîtresse en titre, the whole official mistress thing that Charles II was let's do that in England now too. So it's no, he was not monogamous to her, and no one expected him to be, and that wasn't the way the court ran, because the mistress had all this power, right? So numerous mistresses, they all have fabulous French names. I'll just say a couple of them. Françoise Athénaïs, the Marquise de Montespan, who is, I think, well known. Madame de Montespan is talked about. They had 7 children together. He also had this, sort of frenemy / maybe lover's thing with Olympe Mancini. So through his various liaisons with his mistresses, he produced numerous illegitimate children, most of whom he married to members of cadet branches of the royal family, because they were cool with illegitimate children in France. So he did marry again. So his second wife was Françoise d'Aubigné, the Marquise de Maintenon. Maintenant means now in French, doesn't it? Like the Marquise of now. And now for a quick advertising break.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
This is what you do when you've just found that statement handbag on eBay and you want to build an entire wardrobe around it. You start selling to keep buying. Yep, on eBay. Over that all-black everything phase? List it and buy all the color. Feeling more vintage than ever? It's out with the new and in with the pre-loved. Next thing you know, you've refreshed your wardrobe basically without spending a dime. Yeah, eBay, the place to buy and sell new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion.
Earning your degree online doesn't mean you have to go about it alone. At Capella University, we're here to support you when you're ready. From enrollment counselors who get to know you and your goals, to academic coaches who can help you form a plan to stay on track. We care about your success and are dedicated to helping you pursue your goals. Going back to school is a big step, but having support at every step of your academic journey can make a big difference. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
After countless steps and more than a few miles, your dog drives you forward one last time to make that final climb. And as the rising sun peeks out from the horizon, you know, incredible happens here, because it starts here. With the fuel that makes it all possible, Pro Plan Sport. Discover advanced nutrition made to fuel strength and stamina in active dogs like yours at ProPlansport.com.
And we're back. So he first met her. Ooh, okay. So this is like a Sound of Music situation because she was kind of the nanny. So he first met her through her work caring for his children by Madame de Montespan, noting that the care she gave to his favorite of these children, Louis Auguste, she had a strict religious practice, which turned him off at first, but he warmed to her through her care for his children. So this is also sort of like a Don Draper, Megan from Mad Men thing, just like liking the way that a person acts with the children. So he legitimized his children by Madame de Montespan, which again is not a thing they did in England. And Françoise d'Aubigné became the royal governess. As governess, this is totally a Sound of Music situation. She was one of the few people permitted to speak to him as an equal without limits. Governesses, okay? Then they were super secret, sexy married at Versailles on around October 10, 1683, or maybe that following January. The marriage was never announced or publicly discussed, was an open secret, and lasted until his death. Super secret, sexy marriage. You love to see it. He was a great patron of the arts. We talked before about how his mother had influenced him to be interested in art and theater and things. Let's see. So he founded the Académie Royale de Danse, the Royal Dance Academy, and the Académie d'Opéra, which were important driving events in the evolution of ballet. He also launched music competitions. He also built, Versailles. So Versailles used to be a hunting lodge built by his father that he then renovated into the spectacular palace of Versailles. So he was really interested in building campaigns. So a lot in common with, who is the one where, Ludwig II, who liked building the castles as well. But also this is similar to what Charles II was like. But they were contemporaries. They were similar age. Charles II also wanted to build beautiful buildings. He just didn't have enough money to do it. And then this is just a bit more about things that he built. So he also sponsored many public works in Paris, such as the establishment of a police force and street lights. He also constructed a Hôtel des Invalides, a military complex and home to this day for officers and soldiers rendered infirm by injury or old age. This hospital pioneered new treatments and set new standards for hospice treatment, as well as pharmacology. He also renovated and improved the Louvre, which is now a museum, which used to be a place people lived in. That confused me before in other stories where I was like, wait, she moved into the Louvre, the museum? Not always a museum. Yeah, so he was getting stuff done. Few rulers in the world history have commemorated themselves in as grand a manner as Louis. So he cultivated his image as the Sun King, Le Roi Soleil, the center of the universe without equal. And that's the whole thing about the courtiers had to just like watch him or else. Yeah, so there's numerous paintings of him where he is portrayed largely in majesty, like looking fabulous in outfits, or at war. So he really strongly controlled his image. Truly the Beyonce of his age. So and he was king for so long. So there was just painting, sculpture, theater, dance, music, almanacs, or I guess books that diffused royal propaganda to everybody. So just like, he's the Sun King, he's kind of a god. So so there's over 300 formal portraits. Oh, so he got smallpox at one point. There were some scars, I guess, but the paintings didn't show that. He was shown in paintings as a Roman emperor, the god Apollo, or Alexander the Great. So similar to how Hortense Mancini was done up as like different goddesses and stuff. So it's just kind of like, look how great he is. Dressed up in costume as other popular figures. Yeah, so depictions focused on allegorical or mythological attributes instead of attempting to produce a true likeness. So the portraits were not meant as an exercise in realism, nor to explore his personal character. They just wanted to show how good his outfits were and just overall a sense of just like, he looks so powerful. So this one painter, Hyacinthe Rigaud, so I guess this is like the best known portrait of him, was from 1701, in which a 63-year-old Louis appears to stand on a set of unnaturally young legs. So early Photoshop. His intention was to glorify the monarchy. The original of this painting is now housed in the Louvre, and it was originally meant as a gift to Louis's grandson, Philip V of Spain. However, Louis was so pleased with this painting, he kept the original and commissioned a copy to be sent to his grandson. That became the first of many copies, which I guess is why it became such a popular portrait. And the portrait itself became a model for French royal portraiture up to a century later. So yeah, he liked having his portrait done. He also commissioned at least 20 statues of himself in the 1680s to stand in Paris and provincial towns as a manifestation of his rule. So people could if there was security cameras, I'm sure he'd be like, who was looking at the statue and who wasn't. And then, some people would be favored and other people wouldn't be. He commissioned war artists to follow him on military campaign to document his military triumphs. And then, that's the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. That was him, a commemoration of one of his military successes. So I do appreciate, in the context of just people in history, that he was actually out there doing the battles, it sounds like, not just having other people do them for him. At least that's what I glean, having deleted all of the war stuff from what I'm reading you. So he also, there's also medallions, tapestries. He also loved ballet, and this is Christina of Sweden vibes. He frequently danced in court ballets during the early half of his reign. So like a dancing king, similar to Christina of Sweden. So yeah, he was an eager dancer who performed 80 roles in 40 major ballets, which approaches the career of a professional ballet dancer. And here it's talking about what roles did he play. Sometimes he danced the leading roles. Other times he would be in a supporting role. Ballet may not have been merely a tool for manipulation in his propaganda machine. The sheer number of performances he gave, as well as the diversity of roles he played, seemed to indicate that he just really liked dancing ballet. But so all this stuff about ballet, just really the development of ballet owes a lot to him, apparently. But he was just being I'm great, I'm the Sun King, everybody worships me, etc. But the people, the non-Versailles, regular people, there was clandestine publications, popular songs, and rumors providing an alternative interpretation of Louis and his government. So, people made fun of him as well, as everyone does as happens to anyone who's in a position of power, generally. So his health was probably not very good, which is maybe why he worked so hard to really propagandize that he is healthy and no better man has ever lived. And it's just giving me kind of Trump vibes, a petit peu. So he had many ailments, including symptoms of what sounds probably diabetes. He had dental abscesses, recurring boils, fainting spells, gout, dizziness, hot flashes, and headaches. So I was should I read this? Should I not? I will. But at one point he underwent, and bear in mind, this is 1686. So the kind of surgical procedure that would happen in 1686, just what that would be hands washing wise, in the sense of no one would have washed their hands. So he underwent an operation for an anal fistula performed by the surgeon Charles Félix de Tassy, who prepared a specially shaped curved scalpel for the occasion. The wound took more than 2 months to heal, but it did. So good. Eventually, he died of gangrene at Versailles, 1715, 4 days before his 77th birthday, after having been the king for 72 years. That surgery was 1686. He didn't die for decades after that. So clearly that healed. Anyway, so he endured much pain in his last days. He finally, quote, yielded up his soul without any effort, like a candle going out. His body was laid to rest in the Saint Denis Basilica outside Paris and remained there undisturbed for about 80 years until, every French person I've ever researched. During the French Revolution, people destroyed all the remains that they found there. The French revolutionaries were just destroying tombs, skeletons, coffins. They were just doing all of it. Succession. He outlived most of his immediate legitimate family. He had all these, like Charles, all these illegitimate children too. His last surviving legitimate son, the Dauphin, the Monseigneur, died in 1711, and then he had died in 1750. So yeah, so he outlived his only son, his only legitimate surviving son. So barely a year later, so the Dauphin, the Monseigneur, he had children, and then the Monseigneur's oldest son died a year later. And then his second, so these are Louis's nephews, and his grandchildren. So then his next oldest grandchild died later. So on his deathbed, the only legitimate heir he had left, because it was a whole it can only be legitimate heirs and it can only be boys. So his heir was his 5-year-old great-grandson, Louis, Duke of Anjou, the younger son of Louis's son. So knowing that this is going to be another boy king era, he sought to restrict the power of his nephew, Philip II, Duke of Orleans, so this is Louis's nephew, probably Philippe. It says Philip. Anyway, it seemed like that would probably be who the regent was to the new little baby Louis. So kind of like his father had done before him. So he created a regency council with some power vested in his illegitimate son, Louis' illegitimate son, Louis Auguste, the one who he liked how the governess, later wife, treated. But exactly the same has happened to his parents. After he died, Orleans, so his nephew, who Louis had been trying to restrict, just like his father had been trying to restrict, or his grandfather had been trying to restrict his mother, Orleans had the will annulled. I love that the people are just writing wills, annulling wills. It's just like, what's the point of anything? Orleans made himself sole regent. He stripped Louis Auguste of the rank of Prince of the Blood, which meant that they were official princes. And now they're just illegitimate again. So this significantly reduced the power and privileges of Louis Auguste. So according to Philippe de Courcillon's journal, on his deathbed, Louis advised his heir, I guess this 6-year-old boy, with these words, but in French. Do not follow the bad example which I have set you. I have often undertaken war too lightly and have sustained it for vanity. Do not imitate me, but be a peaceful prince, and may you apply yourself principally to the alleviation of the burdens of your subjects. But some historians point out it was customary to have this demonstration of piety in those days to exaggerate one's sins for religious reasons. So this doesn't necessarily mean this is how Louis really thought about himself. He's just trying to make himself look good to God so he could get into heaven. Louis' detractors. Here I'm going to talk about, because France did so well with military and cultural successes, power, and sophistication, Europeans generally began to emulate French manners, values, goods, and deportment. French became the universal language of the European elite. And I would suggest that's why people like me, basic bitches living in Canada in the year 2022, just think that France is the fanciest place in the world. It's just, I grew up thinking that, and I still think that, and I would like to go there one day. But such a basic bitch thing, which I am a proud basic bitch. Don't worry about it. Pumpkin spice lattes just came out. I've had 3 so far. But yeah, the thing Emily in Paris, or how Sex and the City keeps going to Paris, or there's the thing on the hills where it's Lauren, you'll always be the girl who didn't go to Paris. Paris. Well, it's just funny because Louis didn't like Paris. But just the whole thing of French being this sophisticated, elegant place, I'm pretty sure tracks back to this era and to Louis' influence. His detractors have argued that his various expenditure impoverished and bankrupted France. But his supporters distinguished the state, which was impoverished, from France, which was not, a delineation I don't super understand. But Louis' critics also attribute this social upheaval culminating in the French Revolution to his failure to reform French institutions while the monarchy was still secure. But, how responsible is he for things that happened 80 years after his death, when his successors had sufficient time to do more reforms and things? He's often been criticized for his vanity, but I would say nothing wrong with being vain. He also has received praise. I don't know. He's a person who's talked about a lot, right? By everybody. And I'm going to guess he was king for a long time and he accomplished a lot, but also his propaganda machine. A lot of what, even though people made fun of him in the time, there's still a lot of what remains is nice things people wrote about him, because everyone had to write nice things about him because that was the economy in Versailles. Voltaire, the famous writer, wrote a book called The Age of Louis XIV, and he named Louis's reign as not only one of the 4 great ages in which reason and culture flourished, but the greatest ever. But that's a lot happened after that, and also Voltaire didn't know about a lot of other countries. Here's a nice detail, especially for this international season, which is turning into a real Victor Frankenstein level thing of just people's corpses and body parts having things happen to them. So Louis's heart was mummified when he was buried, I guess. And then in 1848, a piece of his mummified heart, which had been taken from his tomb and kept in a silver locket, which is Mary Shelley to the extreme, to not just have the heart with you in a drawer, but to wear it in a locket. Okay, so a piece of Louis's mummified heart taken from his tomb and kept in a silver locket by Lord Harcourt, Archbishop of York, was shown in 1848 to the Dean of Westminster, William Buckland, who ate it. Why? Don't know, doesn't say. Numerous quotes have been attributed to Louis XIV by legend. The well-known "I am the state," or in French, "L'État, c'est moi," was reported from at least the late 18th century. It was widely repeated, but also denounced as apocryphal by the early 19th century. He did say, but in French, "Every time I appoint someone to a vacant position, I make 100 unhappy and 1 ungrateful." He is recorded by numerous eyewitnesses as having said on his deathbed, but in French, "I depart, but the state shall always remain." And that's Louis. Like, there's so much scandaliciousness in this story, right? But we've talked about those bits in the Hortense Mancini episodes. Like, La Voisin, like that was during that era, the whole, like, the affair of the poisons. We got into great detail about that. So I'm not going to rehash that all here. We all know those stories. So I'm going to score him. I'm talking about the scandaliciousness because that's the first thing. And there was scandaliciousness surrounding him. He himself, though, and again, that was just the Wikipedia. I haven't read specifically anything more in detail about him because there's lots of other podcasts that do that kind of work, and that's not what I do. But I feel like, like with the mistresses and stuff, it's like that wasn't scandalicious to people at the time. Like, he just took so much power and he was able to do with it what he wanted. So it wasn't just like, I don't know. So it's like, in context, it wasn't super scandalous what he did. So I'm going to give him like a 3. Even like the affair of the poisons, that wasn't him doing stuff. That was just people were doing stuff around him. Scheminess in terms of just like him and like figuring stuff out. I don't know, like making everyone be in Versailles. I feel like he's like pretty good for scheminess. I'll give him like a 6. His significance, I'm going to give a high score, I think, because like the development of ballet, just the way that France became this like military power, although later it wasn't such a military power, but just like the propaganda machine. I feel like I'll give him a 7 for significance. Oh, and also the whole thing about like making France just be seen as like the fanciest, most cultured, educated, sophisticated place, even though objectively, I know it's not, but deep in my bones, I just feel like it is. And that's because of the work that he put in. Sexism bonus. I mean, I'm not being like, he was out here being a champion for women's rights, but like he had a wife, he had mistresses, he like married his governess. I hope she like wanted to. Oh, that was a good scandal though. Super secret sexy marrying the governess. But for sexism bonus, I feel like, whatever. I don't know. He's just kind of like, as per anyone, then I'll give him like a 5 for that. So it's 21. Minus 21. Because the asshole scores are always in the minus, in case this is your first time listening to one of these episodes. Because, I don't know. There's enough other histories out there in existence that like talk about how great he is. So we're just like scoring him in terms of assholishness. So minus 21, whatever. And that is Louis XIV. I learned some things live here. You heard me learn them. I shared them with you. We had a nice time. So next time, probably, if I have time to research it, is going to be what you chose, Patreons, on the last So This Asshole poll by a gigantic margin. Every time I put a poll up, something runs away with it, which is good to know because I genuinely can't decide. And then there's always a big majority. So we're going to talk about Christopher Columbus next time. I'm actually surprised I haven't done him before. Like I felt like I had, but then it's like, no, I just did Hernan Cortez, which is like a similar narrative, but different. So that's what we're doing next. I'm recording and then releasing this on September 3rd. I believe we're going to be recording the Les Miserables Vulgar Piece Theater. I forget if it's next Saturday or the one after, but after that, I think, after some like summer pausing of things, I'm hoping to get back into a regular posting schedule here for So This Asshole and for Vulgar Piece Theater. So yeah, until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. So again, just a little bonus treat for all of you, just to sort of a preamble, a pre-show, an aperitif for season 7, part 2, which is kicking off on Wednesday. And we're going to talk more about Versailles in that episode as well. But this kind of paves the way. So we're all sort of ready and pivoting from the America stuff to the France stuff. So that's coming up on Wednesday. And this is Vulgar History. If you want to hear more of these episodes, more of these like casual So This Asshole / So This Goofball episodes, if you join the Patreon as a paid member for $5 or more a month, you get access to all of these episodes as well as episodes of Vulgar Piece Theater, which is where I, Lana Wood Johnson, and Alison Epstein talk about various costume dramas. We've talked about a few from French. Actually, we talked about several from French history. It's usually my fault that we do that. We've talked about on that podcast The Affair of the Necklace, the movie starring Hilary Swank as Jean de la Motte. We've talked about Chevalier, the movie about the Chevalier de Saint George. We've talked about Queen Margot, but also other movies. Anyway, that's all if you join the Patreon as a paid member. You can also join the Patreon for free, just to keep up with what I'm doing, because I post information there, including, that's where I've been posting some stuff about my trip I recently took to London and Edinburgh and Braunschweig, Germany. And also on the Patreon coming up this week, there's going to be a very special new episode of The After Show. That's where when I have a guest on and we have a lot to discuss that's not the topic of the regular episode, we go to the After Show to just like kiki, have some lols, and that's going to be coming up there too. Anyway, this is a special bonus. You'll hear from me again in 2 days on Wednesday with the season premiere of Season 7 Part 2. You can follow me on Instagram and on Threads at Vulgar History Pod. And until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, written, and hosted by Anne Foster. That's me. The editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severn Duo. The Vulgar History Show image is by Deborah Wong. Transcripts are written by Aveline Malik. Find transcripts of recent episodes at vulgarhistory.com.
I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I'm the host and creator of Only One in the Room podcast. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's incredible Only One story. We talk to the realest of real people, dealing with issues like infertility, addiction, human trafficking, and body shaming. Oh, and we want to be fair, so we talk to some celebrities too. Oscar winners, New York Times bestselling authors, supermodels, and even the most decorated U.S. Winter Olympian. Everyone is invited to share their Only One story with our listeners. This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone. Download Only One in the Room wherever you listen to podcasts today.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, a co-founder of the Go Kid Go network. At Go Kid Go, putting kids first is at the heart of every show that we produce. That's why we're so excited to introduce a brand new show to our network called The Search for the Silver Lining, a fantasy adventure series about a spirited young girl named Isla who time travels to the mythical land of Camelot. During her journey, Isla meets new friends, including King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and learns valuable life lessons with every quest, sword fight, and dragon ride. Positive and uplifting stories remind us all about the importance of kindness, friendship, honesty, and positivity. Join me and an all-star cast of actors including Liam Neeson, Emily Blunt, Kristen Bell, Chris Hemsworth, among many others, in welcoming the Search for the Silver Lining podcast to the Go Kid Go network by listening today. Look for the Search for the Silver Lining on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
We're the Ghost Story Guys.
And every 2 weeks, we explore first-person stories of encounters with the paranormal from all around the world.
Then we have some fun reacting to those stories. We like to say our goal is to scare the hell out of you, then make you laugh.
Belief in the paranormal is not required. All you need is a love of great storytelling and curiosity about the world around you.
Subscribe to the Ghost Story Guys now on your favorite podcatcher to hear episodes like High Strangeness in Chicago, The Mystery of Missing Time, and The Haunting of Vietnam, along with dozens of others.
We've talked about mythical bridges, doppelgangers, haunted seaside towns, and so much more.
Remember that story about the guy who was trapped inside a dream and something was hunting him? That was upsetting.
Yes it was.
Want us to help ruin your sleep? Come find the Ghost Story Guys on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else fine podcasts live, or at ghoststoryguys.com.